Hey guys, Shabby John coming out to another Diablo 4 video. All right, this one's going to be pretty specific, guys. What we're going to talk about is going to actually be the simple fact that Exile Con just ended in New Zealand. For those of you who don't know, that is the Path of Exile version of like BlizzCon, right, for Diablo. For those who are watching me are probably Diablo players, not Path of Exile players. Should you be worried about this? There was a big announcement with Path of Exile 2. There was also a big announcement for Path of Exile 1. They are also going to be separate games. See a trend here. It's almost as if they're following the same pattern as like Diablo, right? Does this mean that Diablo is going to die when Path of Exile 2 comes out? Does this mean the next league, which is going to be massive in the Path of Exile scene, is going to steal all the player base in D4? We're going to kind of break it down. We're going to talk about a few different things that I think a lot of people need to understand when it comes to different types of games, genres, even seasons. These types of releases, announcements, they have a very interesting effect on things. Okay, so I'm gonna have background B-roll playing of Diablo, Path of Exile. We're talking about this topic here. So, what happened? Basically, Exile Con happened. Right, did happen the year before because of COVID. They finally had it. Massive announcement with the whole Path of Exile 2, right? That has now been declared a second game, second standalone game. What does that mean? Why am I pointing that out? Why is that important? The reason why that's important is the simple fact that Path of Exile is a game that is derived from the developers of Diablo. So they do share a lot of similarities because they have the same developers. Now, obviously, now that we made it to Diablo 4, this is totally different than Diablo 2, where the developers helped make Path of Exile. Path of Exile has basically taken Diablo 2 and put it on steroids. Created a cult following, I would even say, and it's probably one of the most diverse and overall most content to be done on an ARPG game. I think if anyone who would sit here and try to argue with me that Path of Exile doesn't have more content, more things to do, more customization, isn't more like everything, I would think you probably haven't played it. Or if you did, you didn't follow a build guide and you struggled. So there are a few things to point out and talk about with that because they just announced that, yeah, it's going to be two separate games now. Path of Exile 2 has a lot more new mechanics. However, some of the old mechanics in Path of Exile 1 won't be present, which then makes the game kind of have a nice little twist. What does this do for the ARPG community? What does this do for you, the viewer? So there's a few things to take away from this. You saw that on PoE 2, they announced that they're going to have all the classes, including Druid. That it's actually becoming kind of a fan favorite in Diablo 4. And now, yes, you will have a Druid in Path of Exile, and it seems like it's going to be doing just as much as Diablo 4, and then some. That's typically what you should expect from these types of, from GGG, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying that Path of Exile 2 is going to blow Diablo 4 out of the water. I'm saying it's going to kill the franchise. However, Path of Exile does fundamentally have a lot more things going for it than the Diablo franchise does. However, the caveat of that is, think of the player base. So when I play Path of Exile, I follow the build guide. I'm not gonna lie, the skill tree, it's a little scary. I don't know if you've seen it. It's pretty massive, a lot going on. On top of that, you have to link all of your items with all your gems. And it's a totally different feel on how you actually progress and get power. Also, there's a 100% economy in Path of Exile. It's not gold-based like what we deal with, right, in Diablo 4. So there's a lot of pros and cons, gives and takes. What I've just listed is kind of some of the massive differences in them, but that also means that players who, let's say, don't want to deal with this skill tree that they can't understand, well, don't play Path of Exile, go play Diablo. You can actually follow the skill tree, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing that Diablo 4 doesn't have as much to do or as much depth as Path of Exile, because when it comes right down to it, there's seasons. There's seasons for all of these games. Why do ARPGs have seasons? Well, that's because they know that everyone out there has a certain threshold where they play, and they get burnt out, and then they want to go take a break, right? That's anything, especially with these games, because I mean, you can kind of relate an ARPG game to a bullet hell type game. They're fun to play in the moment, but eventually you do get a little old with it, you get a little stale. Yeah, you can reroll characters, you can do ults that keep you interested, keep you going. However, once you get to a certain level, certain tier, which you aren't there on D4 yet because it hasn't been out long enough, you will hit a plateau where you're not going to do anything else, where you're not going to be able to do anything else because you've done it all, you've got it all memorized, and it doesn't take you very long. So this means that out of the 3 months, you're going to play the league mechanic for probably a month and a half, and then you're going to be kind of bored. So this is where games like Path of Exile 2 being announced and being the second installment to the Path of Exile routine, that gives Diablo 4 and Diablo players in general an additional avenue to not only compete against, but however, to allow players to have a good diversity. So what this means is you can start playing the Diablo 4 season, and once you get, let's say a month and a half into the Diablo 4 season, you may actually be able to go ahead and hop on the Path of Exile 2 season, say, for example. It's going to be a free game, so you might as well. Or you may hop back to Path of Exile 1 season to play intermittently. Myself, I will probably dedicate all my time this first season to D4, just getting the mechanics, playing the different classes, doing content. Next season of Path, I'm going to play, and next season of D4, I'm probably going to split between the games because I do enjoy Path of Exile myself, as it does offer a slightly different challenge than Diablo does. And that's where these types of games, like you're talking to someone, or listening, I should say, to someone who is a casual gamer. Like, I do represent the casual scene. I'm not a hardcore gamer. If you guys saw my compilation reel, I died way too many times in one day running dungeons that I should have probably been able to do. I'm not a god gamer, and I'm not going to claim to be one, but I am definitely a more casual gamer, and I do enjoy both games. So the simple fact that Path of Exile 2 is coming with all the classes, all the new ascendancies, with all the new features that they're going to add, I think gives D4 a little bit more room to bat, so to speak. So what this means is D4 knows, like, yes, Path of Exile 2 doesn't come out, the beta doesn't even come out for a year, so D4 is totally safe for a year, right? Even though they're making massive changes to Path of Exile, it's one of those situations where now they have another game that they can base some ideas off of, that they can bounce content around with, to compete against, right? This type of competition is actually healthy in this space. I know a lot of people out there, unfortunately, are pretty toxic. I'm not gonna lie, everyone I've met in the Path of Exile community, they're fairly toxic. But same with the D4, honestly. Like, look at my comment section, it's pretty negative. Just throwing it out there. But at the end of the day, having these other games, having 2 different Path of Exiles now, having all the Diablos, which I guess for most people are really going to be like D2, D4, I think is pretty much the majority split right now in Diablo. But having those avenues makes a big difference. And then on top of that, we have Last Epoch, who's sliding in there, who's actually going to take probably next year's slot as a full release launch game, which then means that you're going to have Diablo 4 and its franchise wherever it ends up. Obviously, we got the Malignance this season. I imagine that mechanic is going to leave and disappear. And then from there, we'll go ahead and we will get into probably the next mechanic. And I don't really know what that is yet, but I do expect it to be something good, something interesting compared to what we've had. And then we're going to have, like, say, Last Epoch is going to launch, and that's going to bring in another ARPG game to the grind, to the foreground, basically. And all of these games play slightly different. That's the positive side of them. So what's really nice and helpful with these is the simple fact that they're all the same type of genre with the ARPG genre. However, because they are all very different and they all have leagues and seasons, so to speak, it does make breaking them up and getting to play them and not getting burnt out so much easier. So I think a lot of people who are out there hating on the game or saying, hey, Diablo 4 is done for, Path of Exile is going to kill it. Path of Exile is going to do a good job, yeah, absolutely, but it's not going to kill anything. It's actually going to help foster more players to play the genre. I think, personally, I think that's more important than how good are the games. Like, let's keep the genre alive, right? That way it gives people more innovative ideas to do things, make changes. I highly think, like, that type of healthy competition is great for the scene. And I think a lot of people miss the simple point of sometimes it's nice to play a game that's a little more dumbed down. Not gonna lie, Path of Exile is fun. Last Epoch, pretty fun. It's a little slow, but it's pretty fun. I gotta think way too much sometimes. And you know what? I don't want to. I don't always want to. I want to come home, make a bourbon, record a YouTube video, go live, play some Diablo 4 with some friends of mine, click some buttons, laugh, giggle, have fun. Other games, can be more of a chore. That is one downside of playing the Path of Exile franchise is there's a lot of work to be done. You got to do all your maps all the way up to tier 16. You have to do your 3 Uber bosses, and then after your Uber bosses, you have 3 more bosses. And then you got Delve, you got Heist, you got all kinds of other season mechanics that I'm forgetting. There's a lot to take in. That can sometimes be very daunting to the average casual player. Actually, statistics right now show that Diablo 4, most players have just now or are approaching beating the campaign, because we may think an hour or 2 a day is super casual and not very much game time. That's in the reality, that's not necessarily true. Most people actually only get to play for about an hour to an hour and a half time. And what the funny situation is I actually polled a lot of people like around me, community people. Like I know other gamers, even friends of mine that I grew up with that I know are hardcore gamers. And I reached out, I'm like, hey, how much gaming you doing these lately? And you playing Diablo 4? And they're like, yeah, I've been playing it, watched your videos. They're great. I'm like, oh, sweet. How much you been playing? I get about 45 minutes a day. It's like, oh, so you're like level 50? Like, no, I'm level 30 something. They're still grinding, they're still progressing. And that's okay, because it is a more casual based game. And I think that's where people lose and go by the wayside, is not understanding what do these ARPGs bring to the table. It's not always a fire sale. The game's dead, bad, D4 bad, not a thing. It's one of those where now that we have some new, fresh competition, now it's Blizzard's chance and turn to say, okay, yes, I'm going to compete. I'm going to give you something wonderful. It's that type of relationship, that type of progress that really makes a big difference. Did you notice that Path of Exile 2 is going to have dodge? Think that's a coincidence? I don't think so. There's a lot of other similarities, and we can go back and forth, who stole what idea, who did what. But you know what? At the end of the day, they play completely different. They are not copies of each other. They both have their own pros and cons. I actually have a video where I talked about D4, if it even makes the list of ARPG games, because we have so many out there that are powerful. Go check it out. The thumbnail, it's probably like from a couple months ago. Thumbnail, you'll see all the different games that I was talking about. But yeah, overall, in general, I do believe that this is healthy for the community. This is healthy for the scene. I personally am excited for Path of Exile 2, only because now that means I can play my D4, and I know in the back of my head, I'm not thinking, man, I got to stretch this content because I don't know what I'm going to do. I do know what I'm going to do. I have plenty of other revenues with doing either Path of Exile game, mid-season, end of season, or go and play something else and coming right back. That's totally fine too, especially if you want to run competitions and host stuff, right? Like it just makes it very nice and friendly. And the season journey, being that it's only 3 months, lends itself very nicely to doing some major different things and parties and playing other games. And that in itself is very powerful and very helpful. I know a lot of people out there, especially the casuals, are not going to like the seasons. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but any ARPG game, if it's a good ARPG game, it's going to have seasons. I apologize if you were unaware of this, but that's just the gravity of things. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, comment down below. About 95% of you don't subscribe to me. That's okay. But yeah, and also give me your feedback. How do you feel about this? Do you think Path of Exile 2 is a threat? Do you think Path of Exile, with its massive changes coming, is that a threat? Or are you in the same boat as me and you're like, you know what? It gives me another avenue to play. It just adds friendly competition. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. Please make sure to leave it down below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.